Welcome to another Bandology interview. Bandology is a Canadian nonprofit dedicated to more music for more kids via education, collaboration, and community.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Bandology's interview series. I'm Sandy Wright, the education manager, and today I have the wonderful pleasure of speaking to MP Tim Lewis, the MP for Kitchener-Conestoga. How are you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing great, Sandy. Thanks for having me on your show. Appreciate this.
I'm so appreciate you took the time to come speak with us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Currently I am the Member of Parliament for the riding of Kitchener-Conestoga, which is the west end of Kitchener and 3 out of the 4 townships in Waterloo region. And for those listening a little further away, Waterloo region is about 1 hour west of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. So there you go. So that's my job right now.
That is wonderful. You're also my MP, so thank you for your contributions to my community. But my first question is, in addition to being an MP, you grew up and became a professional musician. So we're going to talk a little bit about that experience, as well as the stuff you're doing now. So first question is sort of the big fundamental question. When did you first pick up an instrument?
The story goes, when I was a real little kid, probably before I was able to walk, I would bang on pots and pans. That's what my mom said. I don't know how. I guess I had a decent amount of rhythm. But my mom was a brilliant woman, and what she did was replace the spoons with. She told me this. I don't remember this. She told me she replaced the spoons with socks. So she said I could play on the pots. I could bang on the pots and pans as long as I held rolled up socks as long as possible, which I think kept the sanity. But we also had an apartment piano, which was like a small piano in the apartment. I actually didn't even have 88 keys. And they said that I was able to come home from nursery school or something and do nursery rhymes and plunk them out on the piano and do it successfully. I, again, don't remember this part, but so my parents said, you know what, maybe let's get the kids some lessons. So when I started kindergarten, I started taking piano lessons. Ended up taking right up to the end of high school. So let's say, what is it, about 12, 13 years of piano lessons, classical piano at that time.
That's awesome. I also started around that time. I don't have any fun stories, but that sock is that's a great trick.
To all you parents out there, encourage them to drum. Just do it with socks and brushes and lighter things for everyone's sake.
That's really good advice, especially for homeschooling parents who want their kids to play drums. That's a way to keep the volume down. You might lose a couple of socks, but those are replaceable, hopefully. But yeah, so from that sort of piano journey and like learning to sort of be trained classically, how did you move into sort of how did you make the decision to come to moving into music as a sort of professional career? And also specifically, how did you go from that into working in jazz?
Well, it was interesting. The classical gives you that theory. It gives you the ability to read music and that solid foundation. And so I was very happy playing with that. I think I was probably around maybe 12, 13 years old, and I started hearing some chords on the radio that I thought, these have different color to them. There's some, and now it would turn out to be these jazz extensions that your ninths and 11ths and 13ths and alterations. And I thought, well, these aren't in all the music. And also I gravitate to artists like composers like Debussy or Chopin. And once in a while you'd hear something, but in this other music, I was hearing what turned out to be jazz. I was hearing these kind of colorations and way of making denser chords, and that I started gravitating toward that. And so I started learning a bit more about jazz. There are some people that tend to be able to read music and say, if you put it in front of me, I can read it, but I can't play anything, if it's not on paper. And then there are some people that say, well, I can't read music, but if I sat down on an instrument, I can play. Fortunately, I seem to have both of those skills at a younger age where, again, plunking out those nursery rhymes, the ability to hear and repeat, have it almost like a radio in a head, and I bet you have that too. If you hear something, you can play it, seems to be innate. And then I also have the training of being able to read. So having both those skills let me learn about some of these jazz voicings and chords, and then at the same time, I could read the music or I could hear and start recognizing where they were and start picking out those tone colors. So when it came time to go to university, I ended up going to university and getting a BA in music and focusing on jazz and orchestration at that point.
That's, I love people talk about that first time that they hear the thing that they ended up wanting to do, because it's always an interesting story, and it's always a small story where it's like, well, I went and saw this, or I saw that and I didn't expect anything, and then it just got hit. It kind of hits you and you're like, oh, this is the thing. And I love being able to explore that. I don't have an internal radio that I've had to spend many years getting to the point where I can plunk things out. Actually, it's been that's been part of my journey. That's actually been really valuable. But sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, it's funny because you say those lightning bolt moments, and I never thought there was one specific, like you said, I went to a concert, I saw someone, and that's what I wanted to do. And so no matter who's listening out there, there doesn't have to be that lightning. I didn't quite have it. I had doubts when I went to music. I should probably back that up. When I went and got my degree in music, I didn't start with a degree in music. I started with the degree thinking maybe it was going to be pre-med. And then I switched to economics, and then I switched to philosophy, and then I switched to music. So by the time I finished with this degree, I had come to terms with, this is what I want to do. I just ended up having a minor in economics and a minor in psychology because of it. So the people that have that lightning moment, it's like the one day I saw a horse and I knew I wanted to be around horses the rest of my life. It doesn't have to happen. And you don't have to know what you want to do when you grow up. It's certainly it's not a precursor to being anything.
Yeah, no, it's a journey in a lot of ways. And your journey has been unique because you became a professional jazz musician. And then eventually you moved into working, obviously, in public service and politics. So can you tell me a little bit about how that journey traced from, I'm working in the jazz field, and now I'm the MP for Kitchener-Conestoga?
It's your typical story, right? I grew up just outside New York City. So when I got my degree and graduated university, again, this is maybe not the standard story, but I joined an Italian wedding band in New York City. And I played for about a year playing weddings, which helped you pay off your debt, helped you make a living. And well, we were quite busy. At that time, at the same time too, I was getting a master's degree in elementary education, thinking I was going to be going into education at that point, which sounds awfully familiar to you, Sandy. And so I thought the two made sense, that you can kind of get your weddings and do things on weekends and evenings and still teach during the week. And so in the middle of all of that, ended up meeting a rock band, and we needed a keyboard player. That's what I was doing at the time. So again, a typical thing, atypical, I should say. I quit the Italian wedding band from New York City, and I joined a rock and roll band, and we were traveling up and down the East Coast, recording and touring, sitting in the back of a van in a milk crate, playing from city to city. And making no money, the typical starving artist thing. But I was young and loved every minute of it. It was an original rock band, sort of pop rock, and we were doing quite well. And sometimes we went down to about the Carolinas up to around Toronto area was the area that we were playing, and I got signed to a record label. The record label signed us. We made our first album, and it was about to be released. It actually never ended up getting released. It was about to be released, and the independent label folded. And so the album was at that point in limbo. Everybody lawyered up who owns the masters and who owns the rights to this. And it became a big mess. We had worked for a couple of years to get to this point. And then the whole thing, kind of put the brakes on. But there was this girl up in Canada that I had met, and I thought, let me mix this up and move to Canada and visit her. And now we're married 26 years. And then I moved to Canada permanently, became a landed immigrant, a permanent resident, and then a Canadian citizen. So it's a bit of a less than typical move to go from classical to Italian weddings to rock and roll. And then when I came to Canada, looking for work, I put in some audition tapes at that time and said, look for work. And I got work touring with some Canadian country artists. So next thing you know, I found myself in country and worked my way up there until the bands I was with were signed by major labels. And I was one of the backing band. Wasn't under my name. It was, basically one of the supporting artists. And the number of bands at once, 7 or 8 bands at the same time playing. And we were traveling the world and doing quite well. And then at some point there, I ended up saying, I think I woke up in Calgary one night saying, you know what, my heart is not in country music anymore. I'd like to change things up. And I came off the road and left all those bands and said I wanted to do my own thing, and started for the first time. I wrote some of the songs in the rock band, but for the first time saying I want to do something myself as an artist instead of as a supporting musician. And I started writing, and it turns out, Sandy, that it came full circle, and the music that I was writing was in that kind of jazz tradition, the standard jazz kind of sound that that I had liked when we had that almost lightning moment that we talked about before, where it just appealed to me. So it was interesting because as I was writing these songs, saying what kind of sound am I going to have, it was when I stopped forcing things that I just let the music come out that I started writing these songs. And one of the songs, I played it for someone and they said, "Is that a Gershwin tune?" Okay, I think we're home. If someone's mistaking something for a Gershwin song they've never heard, and then I worked on my own, becoming a recording artist and recording a number of albums. So that got me up to, I thought I'd be a musician for the rest of my life. And then, to be honest, it was around 2014 or so when I moved to Canada. I not only fell in love with the women, I fell in love with the country enough to become a Canadian artist. And so really enjoyed the values and enjoying being here and the social safety nets, the way people took care of each other. And then at that point, around 2014 or so, I got the bug that I wanted to serve in public office. I wanted to make sure that stayed, that those values that I so loved in Canada stayed. And if you want to make a difference, you want to get involved. And until then, I had never thought of being involved as an elected official at any level of government. There's no experience of that. Full-time musician my entire life. So I took a shot at it. I ran in 2015 for member of parliament and came up short by about 200 votes. So, but then I got the bug because I saw I could help people and I could make a difference. So for the next 4 years, on top of the music career, on top of making, I think that's my fourth album that I recorded, I ran again in 2019. And that time I was successful, winning out of 100,000 people in our riding here, winning by 300 votes and change. So all of a sudden I found myself a full-time artist involved in as an elected official serving 100,000 people in Ottawa and representing. And so not only representing the people in our riding, but also then having the experience from the arts sector, which I thought would be a good time to promote people in arts. Then the pandemic hit, and you know that as anyone, the arts and is tied in with hospitality and tourism. That whole ecosystem was hit harder than almost anyone as far as economically. So I find myself in a position where I know what people are going through, and I'm in a position a privileged position that I can hopefully make a difference. So that's not your standard answer, that's for sure.
No, that's definitely one of the more unique journeys that I've been lucky. I love talking to people and hearing about their stories. It's one of my favorite things I do here at Bandology, but that's definitely one of the more unique narratives that I've been privy to of how you getting to the place you are right now. And I've heard a lot of them. But you talked a little bit about being put in the position where you can make a difference and also being able to relate to, like, especially at the pandemic, the experiences of artists. So for you, how do you feel, in addition to being able to like be in a place and relate to those, how do you feel like your musicianship or your experiences as a musician sort of inform your work in public service?
Well, being a musician my whole life and in any of the arts or that creative class, it was usually you're the first one to feel an economic downturn. As soon as there's the slightest economic downturn, it's the arts sector that's affected. It's that work that comes, and it's always the last to come back. And so this is just exacerbated by the level of the pandemic that we have. So it's not just a small economic downturn. Everybody stopped. And even when people were allowed to go back to work, by definition, a lot of us as artists, our job was to congregate people, to bring people together. And so by the very nature of our jobs, it became difficult. And that's something that is not going to come back until all these other sectors recover. So as the position now that I'm in as an elected official to offer supports to people for businesses and families, we know that we have to keep that targeted support focused more and more on the sectors that are going to need that. And the arts is, again, as part of that hospitality, tourism, arts whole sector, what we call a highly affected sector, is going to need that support after other sectors have recovered. So I'm in this position that I can kind of be that artist on the hill in Parliament and explain, because I've been there. I know what it's like to choose between which bill you can pay and go, how am I going to make this work because it's a slow time of year or there's an economic downturn. So in a way, I find that responsibility, that challenge. I'm fortunate to be in that position that I know what it's like and be in a position that hopefully I can help and explain it to people how during the pandemic, it was the artists that we turned to. It was our musicians and our storytellers and people that wrote the movies that we watched and the books that we read. We turned to the arts to make sense of what happened during the pandemic. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. It was that creative class and the artists that helped us make sense and define who we are and how we can help each other and get through this. And someone had mentioned to me that it's, science is going to get us out of this pandemic, but it's the arts that's going to get us through it. And that to me is gets me up in the morning and says, how can we help?
Yeah, no, there's definitely been a wonderful sort of ability of the arts to like help guide us. And as a person, not even as a person who makes art, but as a person who like consumes it or engages with it, rather, that it's been great to have those sort of abilities to like connect with those things. But it's also as a person who works in like the music education industry, but also in music performance and creation parts of that world. I watch a lot of my peers struggle and like have challenges, and people who started businesses a year or two before suddenly being on much rockier footing during the last couple of years and having that economic anxiety. And it's hard because you're around all these people who are wonderful and they're very stressed all the time because they're trying to manage their way through it. So it is somewhat nice to know at least one person in Parliament is sort of aware of that from a firsthand experience.
Well, try and be creative when you have that kind of anxiety is a challenge on top of it. And that's being creative at that point is difficult enough, and to have those real world anxieties and crises going on at the same time, and then people saying, "Go ahead, create, entertain this." So that is a challenge.
For sure. One of the other challenges that like Bandology as an organization has been engaged with, and also generally, I think every musician who works also has some aspect, a lot of them have some aspect of their life that is educational. One of those things that has been impacted is education. And one of the things we always want to ask and find out from the people that we talk to is, for you, in your thoughts, why is music education important? Why does music matter in sort of the educational sphere of like, youth education, but also lifelong education?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sandy. Why is music education? Why are educating people in the arts so important? I think, if anything, what's happened recently has reinforced the importance of it even more. I think that coming out of the situation that we're in, I think it's the creative class that's going to be leading the way. I think this idea of this is how we've done things, and so this is how we should do things moving forward. That paradigm is broken. And I think that we have an opportunity to say, how can we do things better? How can we help more people? How can we be more creative in our solutions in whatever field that is? And I think arts education, music education, and all arts education teaches those kind of soft skills and thinking creatively instead of the standard, your standard way of this is how it's done and that's the end of that. The more we can cultivate people's creative class and creative nature, the more solutions we'll have coming out. Because as soon as someone who's creative sees an issue, they think about it differently. And so I think the fact that we have, statistically, you can say that music education helps, and it's quantifiable now how much it actually helps as far as critical thinking and problem solving. But just the idea that we know that creative class is going to be what's going to get us out of this. It really, really highlights the importance of music coming out in that well-rounded education that should make sure it includes the arts. It's also a universal language as the world's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Just thinking off the top here, it's one of the easiest ways to communicate with anyone is just to share your culture, and arts and music specifically is a very big way of doing that. So I can't advocate enough for music education. I was almost there. Like I said, I was going for that master's in elementary art education myself, and then I was going to I was looking to teach a grade and then do music lessons and things after school, with the wedding band on the weekend. So I was this close to becoming a music educator myself. I was getting home from rock clubs a little too late in the morning and had trouble keeping things up. So something had to give. So I never finished that master's degree, but I did tour with the Spin Doctors.
Different experiences, and both valuable in different ways.
Of course.
I like the thing you said about, because people say music is a universal language, but the thing that you drew out of that was music is an act of like sharing culture, which I think is somewhat, for me, often more realistic, because music isn't always universal. Like you said, there are people who can read music and turn that on, and there are people who can listen and play stuff back. And those people, I know for me, I was the first group way before I was the second one. It took a lot of time for me to get anywhere, and I'm not really close to the second group. And those aren't speaking the same language, even if it's the same kind of music. And I think that's an important comment about how we share music, and it's a way of sharing our experiences, not necessarily always being able to talk to anybody. From that, you obviously have had sort of like a more dynamic's the right word, career towards this sort of political trajectory and from being an artist. And for you, how would you, from those experiences, what advice would you give to young people looking to pursue either music or, public service? And like, what are those things that like you would say, these are the things I wish I knew, or this is what I would tell people?
Yeah, that is a good question, because you always wonder if you were to go back and look at the trajectory, and mine certainly, is not the standard straight line of knowing what you want to do and doing it. If you wonder what advice would have helped you when you were younger to say, stick with it. I don't have any even advice for myself. That the path was certainly circuitous, and it doesn't really change either. You're still changing careers as we go. I changed careers at a time when I didn't expect to do that. So one of the highlights that I get to do now as a member of parliament is to go visit schools and usually talk about civics and politics and getting involved in public service. Unfortunately, now it's all virtual, but I still love the energy and love the questions that our young generation are asking and how engaged they are. But one of the things that I found myself saying to them, and I mean it, is that it's okay not to know. It's very much okay. And I guess I would be proof of that. I say, do you have to go to school to be a mayor or a member of parliament or the prime minister or any of these? You don't have to be. You don't have to go to school for that. You don't have to know exactly what you want to be when you're 10 years old. It's okay not to know. And chances are you're going to change careers from time to time. So you get that well-rounded education. You find the things that you're interested in and you pursue them until you're not interested. And if you're interested in something else, you try that again. Those lightning moments that we see happen to some people that said, whoa, once I saw a dinosaur on TV and that's what I knew I wanted to do. I wanted to be a paleontologist. It happens to some people and that's amazing. But it doesn't happen to everyone. And it's okay not to happen. So my biggest bit of advice would be, don't worry if you don't know what you want to be, or if you're changing your mind. The times are like that. And I think that makes people more well-rounded at the end. So that would be, if I were to share advice, or when I do say it, I kind of let people know I'm a living example of, I didn't, as a little kid, say, this is the role I want to be at. And that's perfectly fine. And you still bring the skill sets of all the things you did learn along the way. So, that would be my piece of advice.
That's good advice. I think the genuine scariest question you have, and it gets scarier as you get older, which is a unique thing, is what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think it's a big question for little kids, and it's a fun question, but there is a moment when it stops being a fun question and more being a, oh boy, I don't know question. And I think that you don't have to is a great answer, because it's also true. I don't think I've met a single person whose entire life has gone exactly the way that they went at 18. Some people, yes, but the percentage of that is very tiny. And I'm at the phase where it's like become clear to a lot of people, well, my career didn't go the same direction I anticipated it when I graduated high school.
So just be good at what you're doing, and give it 100%. And that adds to who you are.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And thank you for it. And I hope it resonates with someone who's listening. One of the things that we also like to do as sort of a round out to that, the interview, is to go a quick rapid fire selection of fast 5 questions, which are just fun, get to know you, short answer, kind of lighthearted questions. And they're not, and I've got this collection of them here. You ready?
I am, but I full disclosure, I'm not usually, I don't know. I don't. I'm nervous now, Sandy.
Nervous. I do not mean to make you nervous. These are, I swear they're fun. The first question is, what's your favorite movie soundtrack?
Favorite movie soundtrack? Interesting. When I was little and I played piano, my dad always asked me to play music for my godfather. And so I listened to it intently. Maybe that's why I ended up in that Italian wedding band. I don't know. But so I probably listened to that soundtrack and as a kid, just to see why I liked it. And there was some different color in the music that I probably liked. So Without rapid fire, that's my answer.
I think that's a good answer. I really hope he didn't make you watch The Godfather when you were a child.
I don't think we watched it, no, but he liked the songs from it. He liked the music. So
The soundtrack is a great soundtrack. Obviously, you play piano and you sing a little bit. But what's an instrument you wish you played? That's a question.
I can say that one clearly. You know what? I've played piano my entire life. Like I said, since I was 5 years old. Also, in grade school, I did the right thing. I took trumpet. I started in grade 4, took trumpet right up to the end of grade 12, and I was in the elementary school bands, the middle school bands. We had a little Dixieland band. We had a jazz band. And then the marching band. And by the end of grade 12, I was fortunate enough to be band major, the person at the 50-yard line directing. And so I did a bit of trumpet as well, which I probably have lost that embouchure, and I put that down after high school. But there is one thing on my list, and I'm not done with your bucket list of things that you want to do. And one of them, out of the 2 things that are on my list, is to learn a second instrument, another instrument, and it would be guitar. If I could go back, I know I said I wouldn't know what to say to go back as a younger self. If I could go back to my younger self, maybe at 12 or 13, I would have said, learn guitar. Piano is fantastic to play. It's laid out properly in that you've got bass on one side and treble on the other. And it makes sense. And it's got both clefs and you learn melody, you learn harmony. It's a good, fantastic foundation. But you can't sit on a beach or under a tree and play a piano. But I see these people bringing their guitars around playing. So I wish I had learned how to play the guitar, and I still have. I have an acoustic guitar, and I'm a guitar owner, and I can clunk out some chords. But that is something that is still. I'm not giving up on that one. I'm going to learn. And if I would suggest to anyone who might be interested in guitar, and I don't know if this is good advice, and you're the professional, but look into ukuleles, which I refer to as the gateway to guitar learning. So.
Very genuinely, I taught at our last band camp, which we hosted in Oakville. I taught ukulele classes, and it's a great instrument. I had to learn a lot of ukulele to prep for those classes.
I have a uke.
Great.
I have a uke, and it's a tenor, and I even got the drop C. Is it? Yeah, the drop C. Now octave lower to make it sound even richer. It's a beautiful thing.
It's a wonderful instrument. You're also not the first person to say guitar. A lot of people answer guitar when I ask them that question, which I always find shocking because it feels like everybody I know plays a little guitar. But then everyone I talk to doesn't. And I'm like, I guess maybe I'm in a strange situation. But that's an instrument. And obviously you play a few and those are talents you have. But what's a hidden talent you have? I find this question is hard for musicians because they're like, well, I do them for my career. Most people would say I play piano, but I do that. But for you, and it can be something like cooking or gardening or something, but just like something that maybe people don't know.
Hidden talent. I move my hands a lot and I'm anxious. So talking to you before we hit the camera, I showed you on my desk is my jazz brush drums. I tend to, when we're sitting there, move my hands. I keep them off camera and move. So one thing I taught myself was a Rubik's Cube. So I can do this in about a minute and a half, I think, is in a good way. And it's probably a bit of a fidgeting thing, or like maybe because I move my hands all my life. So maybe it's one of those things I focused on, and I probably never shared that with anyone. That's something I can do. So I guess by definition, that is a hidden talent. You didn't say how useful it had to be, but
it didn't have to be useful at all. It's we're not worried about being useful. Though I am envious.
Yes, sometimes off camera when I'm talking to someone, I might be looking down and I might be working on a cube.
I can't do a Rubik's Cube to save my life, so I'm always envious of people who can. Yeah.
I never could. I taught myself recently, so it's never too late.
Hey, it's a fun skill, and it's a good show-off skill. It always impresses people at any age, I've found. But our fourth question is, can you name sort of one of the favorite concert or a couple of your favorite concerts you've ever attended?
Ooh. I would say, you know what, as a musician, as a full-time musician, one of the occupational hazards is working on the same nights that all the other good concerts are on. So I haven't been to tons and tons of concerts. But I would say that the ones that are most rewarding for me are friends of mine when they have a new CD release party or something. Those are the ones that just kind of, I feel invested in. And so nothing specific as far as that, but usually someone's CD release parties, friends of mine who are artists, when you make an album, you have that first concert and you want to debut that music to everyone. I think there's a certain excitement about that. So I've been to less concerts than most people, only because most of the nights that concerts are, I work. But I would say that the ones that impacted me the most were my friends' CD release parties. That's not an official answer, but that's
no, that's a great answer. It's also true. I've been to so many people's like first shows, and like I did my degree was in composition, so I went to a lot of new premiere concerts, and it was always wonderful to like see people I cared about have their stuff played. And all through that and grad school, it was wonderful. It's always a great experience, and I can't wait until I can see. I had a couple of my friends are in bands, and their next records I know are sort of in the process of getting made. Once it's sort of safe to go back and do stuff like that. And it's very exciting to know that eventually I will get to hear that stuff in person. Our last question in the rapid fire fast five is the most pandemic related question, which is, what's the last TV show you binge watched?
My daughter and I just watched all of Loki, the Marvel Universe one. We just watched that one straight through. As much as I can binge, it's got to be like once in a while as opposed to one after another. Yeah. I get a chance to chip away at things. So that was we watched that from beginning to end. I don't know if there's a season or two, maybe just one season, I think it was. But that counts as binging. So that got us through. Everyone just started the Beatles documentary as it's called Get Back. I think it's called Get Back, and that end of the thing, which is a bit of a rabbit hole because now I'm starting to listen more and more to the Beatles music, which is a big influence on myself and so many other artists. So, but I can't watch it in these big blocks. I can only watch a little at a time. So if I could lock myself in and watch for a zillion hours, I'd do it. But my binging is chipping away. But right now, the Loki thing is the one I finished, and the Beatles thing is the one I'm watching now.
Yeah, no, a lot of people have very relative what binging is. I know people can watch a TV show in a night, and I cannot. Oh,
you mean like a whole series? Yeah, I've never done that. Sounds awesome.
Maybe not a whole series, but a whole season in like a night. And don't have the patience or the hours, and my eyes will burn. I spend too much time on screens as it is. But that's all our sort of questions. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up here, do you have any, you or the government have any exciting things you want to talk about, either in the community or on a national scale, about the arts or community music events, those kind of things sort of coming up in the future, or hopefully coming up in the future?
You know what I would just say to my fellow artists, the people that are there, is just hang in there. You're appreciated. You're missed. And there were times, and you might have been there, Sandy, and myself as an artist, that you're playing to less than capacity crowds, let's call it that. And you have these moments of, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And there's a pent up excitement to having live music and live theater and just art in general, to bring people around and have those conversations. So hang in there. And we're going to continue as a federal government to continue to support you and make sure you have what you need to get through. We're almost, we're toward the tail end. We're going to finish this fight and get this done. Help out the rest of the world so we can all kind of travel and do more. And the arts is going to be, boy, when things come back, someone has kind of talked about the Roaring 20s back in the day, kind of thing. Whenever you talk about those Roaring 20s, they're not talking about the banking and the other stuff. They're talking about the arts and the dancing and the music. I think it's going to be the artists that are going to help us kind of come out and get this going. So hang in there. We're almost there, and we're going to make sure that we're supporting everyone to the end. But just know that you're necessary and you're appreciated.
Thank you so much for those words, and I hope. Thank you. As an artist, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I've been Sandy Ray, talking to MP Tim Lewis for Kitchener-Conestoga on behalf of Bandology's interview series. We have stuff like this coming out every Thursday and Monday. That's the wrong order alphabetically, but it's not alphabetically by weekday, but it's fine. And on Fridays, starting in February, our What's Your Forte podcast is coming out with a whole new season full of great arts organizations and people and interviews taken from this video series. Thank you so much again for speaking with us, and have a great rest of your day.
Appreciate this so much. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, you can learn more about our organization at bandology.ca, which features information about music education, advocacy and research, and our Play a Gig and Bandcamp programs. Follow us on social media for more videos, performance, and interviews on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.